Henry, my brother, how you doing?
My man, how are you, my friend?
I am blessed. Really great to finally see you, meet you in the virtual world. We'll be going a bit back and forth on social and on emails. But my brother, thank you for being here. Thank you for blessing us with your time. Before diving into that, let me just introduce you to my community. So this is Henry Kaminski. He's a branding expert, and I'm really excited to dive into all of the things that are linked up with branding because it's something that everybody needs in a certain sense. And let me introduce myself to your community, Henry, if you permit. My name is Dedeyan. I am a professional speaker and a peak performance coach. So Henry, let me just start off by saying, how are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome, man. It's a beautiful fall afternoon over here in New Jersey. I see my man Zach Knight in the house. What's going on?
Let's go.
I see a bunch of beautiful people in the audience. So welcome, and I'm excited for this conversation.
Absolutely. And yes, thank you guys for signing us, coming on to the live. Hello, Zach. Hello, Lali. A lot of amazing people. So let's just jump in right away. How come you call yourself a branding expert? And what I mean, how come, is how have you developed the skills over the years to really call yourself a branding expert? Because branding in itself, I don't know what you think, but as an entrepreneur, is extremely important and a vital part for your success, especially nowadays with the social media presence, with the online world, and so on and so forth. So what have you cultivated over the years when it comes to a skill as a brander?
Yeah, so let me give you a quick little backstory. So I've been in the branding space for 15 years. It's not like I lost my job because of COVID and I'm here now trying to pose as a branding expert. Like a lot of people have been doing. I'm sorry, but it is what it is out there these days. So I've been in the branding space for 15 years. I started as a graphic designer, a freelance graphic designer, and I was a one-man band for 5 years, 6 years, until I finally said, if I want to scale this thing to 7 figures and beyond, I need to build out systems. I need to build out a team. I need to start to replace myself. And that's exactly what I did, because year 5, I sort of hit that brick wall. Like, all right, now what do I do? I'm kind of burning out, and this isn't sustainable the way that I'm running this business right now. So where do I go? So I tucked my tail between my legs and I said, let's get help. And so I hired a mentor and went through that whole process, and they sort of steered me in the right direction. And I realized that in order to survive as an entrepreneur, you have to constantly evolve and you have to constantly reinvent yourself. And you have to constantly increase the value that you deliver to your audience, to your customers. And I was stuck because I didn't know how to do that as a freelance designer when Fiverr came out, when 99 Designs came out. How the hell am I going to compete with these $5, jobs? So I'm sorry, my dog likes to always steal catch himself. I'm going to try to do it the best I can. So, I couldn't beat Fiverr, so I joined Fiverr and I became a Fiverr designer, and it was the worst experience on the planet.
Oh, wow.
Because I was now being hired for $5, where I would usually charge $600-700 for that job, right? Mm-hmm. So I've scratched and clawed and got to where I'm at today, not by ease, but by determination, by tenacity. And I've learned the goods, the bads, the uglies about developing my own personal brand, but also now helping hundreds of personality brands over the past 15 years, how to position themselves online and create an online presence that truly represents them, but also reflects the value that their business delivers. And that's the business that I'm in these days, is really helping people enjoy what they love to do and go out and help a whole bunch of people with their product and service. So that's a little bit of a backstory of how I can now I still don't consider myself an expert. I consider myself as somebody that's been in the game 15 years and got a lot of bumps and bruises along the way, but I'm constantly learning. I'll always be a student. And that's pretty much the answer to your question.
Henry, I love that, and it definitely shows. Like, I mean, you've done it right. 15 years in the game is, something very significant. And the fact that you like you said, you took your bumps and bruises and went from one thing to another, tried Fiverr and all that, and really noticing, hey, where your talents lie. And there's one thing you mentioned that I want to highlight before going and unpacking even more of the branding aspect, and you kind of giving us your advice on how we could brand ourselves better. You mentioned at a certain point at the 5-year mark of your business, you realize that, oh my God, I kind of hit a wall and I realize I'm a solopreneur and I want to go to the next level. And for that to happen, I have to kind of outsource from, I guess, hiring a mentor you mentioned and other people around you. Talk to us about that process, because I have a big entrepreneurial following and a lot of them are through that process of, growing their business and then expanding that business. What are the couple of things that you learned when you started hiring, when you started growing? Was there, I'm guessing, a lot of growing pains? How did you go through that process?
Yeah, so I did it all ass backwards. I'll be honest with you, all backwards. I hired a team before I had my processes and systems in place. So they all sort of looked at me like, all right, well, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to do it? And I said, I don't know. Like, don't project managers come with that? Like, right? And no, they don't. You have to have your processes and systems in place. I'll give you my epic fail, and it really pushed me towards the whole systemization of things inside of my business today. So I had rolled out this program. God, it was probably going back 8 years ago. And it was called Branding on Demand. It was a subscription-based design program. It's very similar to what you see out there today. Felt like I was one of the people that kind of spearheaded that whole concept. And so I marketed it well, and everybody was fired up. I launched it, and I got 40 new clients in one day.
Let's go.
30 days, I had to close the business down because, one, the quality of service was not there. Two, I completely buried myself in work because I didn't have the systems, I didn't have the infrastructure nor the support to handle that kind of business. And I just tore it all down. And there was a few clients that stuck. A lot of clients left disgruntled and pissed. I'd be pissed too. Listen, I signed up for this. I'm not getting this. What's the problem? It ain't me. It's you, Henry. So when I shut it all down, I said, okay, learn the hard way. Now it's time to restructure. So then I hired somebody actually to help me build my systems because I didn't know how to do it. And he walked me through a very tedious step. It was nauseating for a creative like myself. I want to get out there and do. I want to be doing live streams. I want to go out and create. I want to build. The step-by-step manual process of organization is not my strong point, right? But it was to this guy's. That's why I hired him, right? So you hire out your weaknesses, right? So we went through the process. He built a very strong system for me. All I needed to do was make sure that it was well-oiled, had the right people pushing the right levers, and we can make this happen again. So I did that. I mastered the system, I hired the right people, put them in the right places, and then let it run. And then that helped me tremendously get out here and do things like this with you while the team is behind the scenes doing all the heavy lifting, which if you want to scale to 7 figures and beyond, you have to have that support because it's very, very difficult for one person to handle all of those hats and to handle all of those positions.
That makes perfect sense, Henry. And you know what? I allude often to this example. Like a master chess player knows anywhere between 10 to the next 15 moves that he's going to do. But the reality is he cannot do move 10 before he does move 8, 9, and 10. So you have to know your systems and processes before doing that jump. And I love the fact that you mentioned as well, you hire your weaknesses, which is other people's strength. With as a team, you guys get better. So I really love that, Henry, that you mentioned that. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with that. And let's jump into the aspect of branding. So like we said, I believe, maybe not back in a day, let's say like 20 years back, that branding was for everyone. Now I believe everybody should be branding. It doesn't matter if you're an employee, it doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur, it doesn't matter if you have a product. There is value in branding in itself, and we see it nowadays. Now, that being said, when people are aware of this, there's a lot more noise with the branding world out there. Everybody has and can put their voice out there, which is great. But the quality or the entry level is so much lower, so the quality is not as there as much. So how do we stand out within this massive noise of information out there? How does the consumer take in and take the information that's valid for them as well? So two parts to that.
Awesome question. I'm going to give you a crash course on this right now. I think the biggest thing that solopreneurs need to focus in on right now is narrowing their focus. And this is nothing new. This isn't brain science. This isn't a whole huge, oh, this is an aha moment. One of the things that we need to do as competition and markets get stronger and more crowded is to narrow our focus of expertise. Mm-hmm. That is one of the phenomenal ways of standing out. So I've carved out a very nice niche for myself here at Unique Designs. So yeah, we've worked with 5, 10, $15 million businesses before with rebranding and things like that. We've worked with solopreneurs that are just getting started, that have some money that they want to reinvest in a legitimate brand, right? But I found my sweet spot. It's this 5-year entrepreneur that's been kind of figuring it all out and finally got to the point where they're making decent money. They got a product that's been validated, but it's just not positioned properly. They're not positioned properly, and they need branding help. They need messaging help. They need identity help. And that's my target audience. It's that 3 to 5 year entrepreneur that is looking to take their online presence to the next level, their offerings to the next level. And so that's all I really focus on. My messaging is for you guys, that personality brand. So I've worked with doctors, NFL and professional athletes, coaches, consultants, these types of folks. And on all different levels. Some people that are just starting out, they have some capital, and they, instead of spending it on a car, they're going to spend it on their business. And then I have people that have been in the game for quite a while, and they're like, listen, I want to make this legit. I've been fussing around with Canva and this and that, and I want something legitimate. I want to do it right this time. And that was not my words. That was a client's words. And that's where I come in and really help them structure their brand strategy, structure their brand messaging and identity, and then build the whole thing out for them, right? So that's what the team's for. So we could build your whole brand identity. We could build your website. We could build your funnel. And I'm not trying to be a jack of all trades here. This is just something that comes part of a lot of the strategy. So what I do to stay in my lane is I focus directly with the client. I'm only working with the client on the strategy part, right? Once I get done with the strategy, then I hand over the brief, if you will, the brand brief to my design team, and I go over it with them, and then they do the heavy lifting when it comes to the logo design, the website design, the funnel builds and designs. Like, I did all of that in the past 15 years. Now I've sort of graduated and said, you know what, I don't want to do that manual labor, if you will. It's a horrible analogy, but I'm not interested in that. I'd rather be the foreman on the job, right? And that's how I've positioned myself. That's how I've built out my business, and it's a beautiful thing, you know. But it didn't come easy.
Yeah. Okay, a lot of things to unpack here. So the first thing that I kind of highlighted or I noticed when you talked about how to stand out within your messaging, number one is niche down. Have a specific message for a specific clientele, because there's so much out there. Don't be generalist. So that's the first thing that I caught, and 100% agree upon that. Second thing, once all of that is done, make your messaging from your copyright to your website to your logos to whatever you do on social media, correlate that same message in itself. So that's one thing over there. And you mentioned when it comes to that aspect of you have done something as an entrepreneur for X amount of years, now you're delegating and you didn't want to do that when you were saying kind of like the grunt work. That's understanding the delegation process. But you know what, Henry? I truly believe those 5 years were really important for you because you know how to do the work now in a certain sense. So when you delegate, you know what you're asking for them. You know how much time it takes. And for me as an entrepreneur, like beginning COVID, I was a solopreneur. Now I'm blessed to have 8 colleagues working in my team and working for the same mission and vision. And I used to do all my own editing and all that stuff, the marketing stuff. And now I have a guy that's like phenomenal at what he does and so much better than what I could have ever done. But at least I have an understanding of, you know what, when I ask him to do this, that, and the other, I know about what it's going to take because I've done it in a certain way. So I love that analogy and approach as an entrepreneur, Henry. And when it comes to branding, what is the number one thing you see entrepreneurs and people make as mistakes? Now, you talked about niching down, but if there's some of the mistakes that you could kind of tell us so we won't fall in those potholes when we're trying to brand ourselves, when we're trying to put a message out there to our community?
They lack a point of view. They lack a point of view. The reason why Patrick Bet-David is so popular, the reason why Joe Rogan is so popular, the reason why Elon and Zuck and all these people are so popular, Gary are so popular, is that they have a very strong point of view. So I have one, and it comes very naturally. It comes very inherently. I'm from the East Coast. I'm born and raised in New Jersey. People from New Jersey have a tendency to be very blunt, straightforward. It's a point of view that we have. Now, I share that with Gary, of course, but I'm not Gary, right? And there's not everything that I don't agree on everything that he talks about, right? I have my own point of view on certain things. And the biggest mistake that I see a lot of personality brands making these days is they're suppressing that point of view because they are afraid of judgment. They're afraid of putting the freaking flag in the sand and saying, this is what I stand for. And you know what? It comes with age. It comes with experience. I'm not pointing fingers because I was that guy for many years until I turned 40. And I think that was the magic number that hit for me, that I said, you know what? I'm not getting any younger. And if anything, I'm starting the second half of my life, if you will. God willing, I live to 80 plus. I'm not going to, I'm not here to offend anybody. I'm not here to make anybody feel less than. But I feel strongly about certain things, and I'm not going to be afraid to talk about them. Like, for example, I have a very hard time with people that want to reap the benefits of a 7-figure business plus, but they don't want to put in the work to do it. Like, that's a problem. That is a huge problem for me because I put in the work, right? So, like, you can't reap the benefits of what I am earning right now if you want to take shortcuts, if you don't want to take those risks, if you don't want to establish a strong foundation. Like, you're not eligible, right? And so I speak very freely about that, and just to wake people up, because I think there's a lot of people that want all the nice stuff but don't want to put in the work to do it.
Henry, I mean, you just opened a can of worms of a great conversation here in regards to that aspect of having your opinion and putting it out there. I was legit having this conversation, if I'm not saying with one of my clients, or was it my team? Either way, we were looking at a certain person, and I'm like, this person is really great, and he's somebody that's extremely lovable by everybody. But when you're somebody like that, that means you don't necessarily have an opinion in itself. You're not like strongly standing for one thing or another, and that creates that you're that neutral person. Nobody could hate you because you're neutral. But if you are that person that's either saying something very positively and somebody's following them and like, oh yeah, that's the guy, or rubbing people on the wrong way, this is the only way that you're really going to stand out within the crowd, which is essentially understanding, having your opinions, being value driven within that, and putting it forward. Now, that being said, within the social climate that we're living, within the cancel culture that we're living, how can we, or how should we present that ideology? Because you mentioned some people like Gary Vee, Patrick McDavid, Zucks, and all that stuff. And granted, they've made it to a certain level. I'm sure there's somebody that was like that from the get. But how do you go about balancing that? Or should we not even care about that side of the cancel culture and just be true to ourselves and tell the things that we need to say, even though we might say it wrong, we might say this, that, and the other, or we might offend certain people while we're saying it, because we're not always very eloquent when we say certain ideologies or thought patterns.
Well, let's take a look at a real case study right now. Let's take Dave Chappelle.
Okay.
He's roasted over the past week about his stance on transgenders. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I watched Closer. I watched it from front to back, and some of the stuff was funny. Not towards some of the stuff was funny, but some of the stuff just got to be too much. Mm-hmm. I don't hate Dave Chappelle now because of his point of view. Okay? I, in my personal opinion, think he's handling it quite well. But not everybody's Dave Chappelle with millions of dollars in the bank. Okay, so let's take that for what it is. Here's one thing that I did hear him say, though, that I happen to agree with. In this country, right? So I can't speak for other countries out there. I can only speak for the U.S. In this country, for whatever reason, if you don't if you disagree with somebody's lifestyle, that means you have to either fear them or hate them. And Dave was like, I'm not signing up for that. I don't hate them. I don't fear them. I don't agree with their lifestyle. That's it. Period. So how can you hate somebody because you disagree with their lifestyle? Listen, I don't even know that world, okay? So I don't have an opinion on it whatsoever, to be quite frank. Not something that I would do because I just don't. It's not something that I have to even think about. You know, I implicitly know that transgender is not something that I'm interested in, right? And that's it. I don't hate those people. Let them live their lives. They ain't bothering me. You know what I mean? And I think that's the issue. Not to get all super deep and political here and all of that, but I think that's the big issue. If you dislike somebody, if you dislike a lifestyle, that means you have to fear them or hate them. I don't believe that either. And that's something that, you know, I feel very strongly about. Listen, to each his own. There's things in my life that I do that I'm sure a lot of people don't agree with. Not your life. You don't have to worry about it. It's the way that I want to live my life. So I'll share this with you. And this is something that is just really present right now in my life. 2021 has been a rough year for me personally. I've been going through some burnout in business earlier this year. Been able to get through that with help. Thank God for my board of directors. I like to call them. I have a board of directors of great people in my personal life, not just my business, but in my personal life that I call my board of directors. And they help me through that burnout, right? But this year has been a tremendous stress on myself and my family because we have experienced a lot of death in our family. Okay? Close friends, family members, and it has put mortality very front and center in my life at this current moment and this current age of my life. And all I keep saying to myself is, if I wake up tomorrow, it is a gift. It is not given. It is not an automatic. So what I realized this year was this. Life is very finite. Mm-hmm. And as we're younger, we think we're going to live forever. I can promise you at 41 years old, I still feel I'm in the best shape of my life. I feel healthy as an ox. But because of what I saw this year, people dropping dead. Literally, I'm at a football game one day, and the next morning I get a phone call. That guy you were sitting next to, yeah, your friend for 10 years, he's dead. Massive heart attack in his sleep. He's 43 years old. Right? These people dropping dead of COVID. I was in a mastermind group earlier this year. The only guy that I connected with in this whole fucking group, excuse my language, I find out 2 weeks ago he died of COVID. Just like that. Got COVID, got pneumonia, gone. So if I'm going to live my life worried about what Chris thinks of me, what anti-stagnant and Christian AV photographer and Ask Digital Amit, if I'm worried about what all these people think of me, am I living my life?
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, there's a lot of things to unpack here. I'm going to try to do the best of it and still be respectful for your time here. So first and foremost, let me go kind of backwards to what you just said. Let me just say my condolences for the losses around you, my brother. It's definitely a difficult time that we're living through with all of this. I 100% agree, but I love the fact that you had that awareness of life is finite and respect it to the best of your abilities every single day. And the Stoic philosophers always used to bring this in the forefront, and they used to say in Latin, memento mori, which essentially makes us realize our mortality. And it's a practice that they used to always think about their own death, the death of their loved ones, and so on and so forth. And it put them in a perspective of appreciating the present moment. They're like, all right, cool, I'm not dead now. I'm awake, I'm alive, let me do what I need to do, even though you're going through difficulty, even though you're going through depression, overload at work, or whatever the case is. So that's one thing I thoroughly love, that you kind of did that correlation there. As well, I love how you're like non-apologetic about your ideologies and your approach. And I think that's where it kind of goes about that, like, hey, I'm comfortable within my skin, and kind of being like, hey, that example if you give Dave Chappelle, which is very much in the forefront of today's conversation, is very accurate in that end. And if you mind, I'll give you my opinion on that subject. I truly believe in that situation, it's a question of empathy that's a bit lacking on all parties. What I mean by this, it's super easy to point at somebody because he's on a stage and so on and so forth, and put apart what he's trying to say in a way that's very narrow to further your beliefs, let's call it, or further your cause. And in the opposite, there is that understanding, like you said, you were talking about a certain community, transgenders and all that stuff, like empathize that, listen, you're doing you, that's perfect, okay, it's not what I do. But I think it's a balance of empathy that people should be developing more in the world if we want to go more forward, and respect towards each other, because it's so easy, like there's so many examples we could look at and like point towards. They're doing it to advance their cause in a way that's not necessarily authentic. So yeah, I truly love this conversation. And Henry, I feel like, man, we could go on a rant, and I'm legit looking at the time here.
I don't have anything until 3 o'clock. So I mean, I'm all yours, as long as you want to go. But I just want to make sure that the audience is getting value out of the conversation. So if you're getting value out of the conversation, please, drop some hearts, and if you have any questions, guys, drop them in the comments or in the question box, and Chris will field them, because we want you to be part of the conversation as well. We're talking about branding. We're talking about how to stand out in today's busy market and crowded social media and things like that. And there's 1,000 ways you can skin the cat here. But being in business for 15 years, being 41 years old, I've learned that when you finally own who you are, everything gets easier.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to ask you one last question, if you permit, with that, Henry, because I truly love that aspect of, owning who you are. And you said that for you, that shift happened at 40 years old, when you realized somewhat, you're in the second half of your life. And by the way, brother, you do not look a day over 40. So let me just throw that out there. Like you did mention, you're in the best shape of your life. I completely understand that. So when it comes to my last question, when into the branding world and so on and so forth. So how can we be living, like how can we spot ourselves when we're not being truthful or not speaking our truth on our brands. Because like you just mentioned, there's teams, there's this, there's that. A lot of people give you opinions. Is there something you specifically do before posting something, putting videos out there to be like, hey, is this actually my voice, or is this a herd mentality? Is this somebody else that wants to kind of put this message out there? I don't know if that's a clear question, but I want to know your opinion on that.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So when I'm out there pushing content, my biggest concern is this going to help the people that I want to help? Okay. So I've broken it down into 4 pillars. You know, personal development, I'm very passionate about. Personal branding, I'm very passionate about. Marketing funnels and online marketing is something that I'm very passionate about. And systemization and entrepreneurship and creating something from nothing is something that I'm very passionate about. So as long as what I'm posting is real, I've experienced it, I'm confident in speaking about it, and it's going to provide value or help somebody think differently, or maybe push them over the edge and say, you know what, I haven't thought of it that way, but that gives me the validation to go ahead and do it, then that's the type of content that I'm going to put out. Sometimes it's going to hurt, or sometimes it's going to ruffle some feathers the way that I put things out, because it is very direct, right? Again, the point before, trying to accumulate all of this wealth but not putting in the work that everybody else is doing, that's set up for disaster there, right? And so that's something that we have to pay attention to. So that's from the content perspective. From, does it feel right or doesn't it feel right? Right? Only you know why you're doing something. I'll give you a quick example. I always bought this one specific type of car because I always wanted to, with that car, because it's a very status-driven vehicle, with that car, I can tell everybody that I'm successful, that I have money, that I'm above middle class, if you will. And then I said to myself, who am I proving this to? Why do I have to prove this? So I sold it. And I got another truck. It's just as nice. But it's not a status symbol.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a status symbol. Why? Because I'm comfortable with who I am. I don't need materialistic shit anymore for you guys to think that I'm successful. I know I'm successful. I know I'm living a life that I love. So what's the most important message out of this whole thing today is a couple things. One is, are you doing what you love to do? Are you doing, I sound like Marie Kondo here, but are you doing things that spark you joy? If you are not, why are you doing it? So get very, very clear, guys, on why you're doing what you're doing. I'm on a mission. I want to live the best life that I can live before I take my last breath. I'm on a mission to be a role model for my 4-year-old son. And I want to be an inspiration for people that feel like they would never amount to anything because they had it rough growing up. But then, look at me. I got a 740 on my SATs. I grew up with my father raised me all by himself. He worked 4 jobs, so he wasn't really around that much to raise me. He did the best he can, and he did a phenomenal job. But I had to learn a lot of things off the streets. I had to learn a lot of things the hard way. And I was thinking about it recently. I'm lucky I'm even here today talking to you based on what I've done in my past.
Henry, I mean, thank you for that rant at the end. Main 2 things I just want to highlight real quick. clarity, have massive clarity of who you are. The examples he gave with the vehicle, what understanding what success is, and that's for you. And the second thing, whatever you're doing, you put massive value in towards. So anyway, last thing over here, where's the best place that people could connect with you if they want to connect with you and your team to help them with their branding and so on and so forth?
Yeah, we're on Instagram. Connect with me here on Instagram. It's my most active platform.
Let's go.
And the link in my bio has access to my podcast, has access to my YouTube channel. The podcast is called the Brand Doctor Podcast. It's everywhere that a podcast is available. I highly recommend you check that out because I share a lot of personal stuff there. I share a lot of business stuff there. And it's a great way to understand the inner workings of a business that you can create as a solopreneur, but actually create a 7-figure business plus out of that by surrounding yourself by the right people, surrounding yourself with the right systems, and surrounding yourself with an audience that you truly want to serve.
Henry, I love that. Everything you mentioned will be in the show notes below. And I'm actually excited. We actually are scheduled. I'm going to be on your podcast as well. So we're going to continue this great conversation. I truly loved it. You definitely have a lot of energy. You're definitely, you know what you're talking about and you're passionate about it. It shows. So brother, true pleasure. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thanks so much, Chris, for having me. I look forward to having you on the show.
Awesome. Speak to you soon. Ciao, ciao.